This week, we complete our 3-part episodic series of women who expose America's cultural pressures to abort. As we shared before, it's nearly impossible nowadays to read a headline or hear an activist talk about abortion without hearing them say, if you are of a different race or socioeconomic class, you need more abortions in your community. I've often wondered how this push and type of messaging impacts people in those communities. So I caught up with women across different ethnic and poverty levels to understand how this push to abort in their neighborhoods impacted their decisions and how they feel about it now. Join me for this episode as I speak with Lorianne, a Floridian woman who grew up in poverty and saw the cultural pressures to abort all around her. She shares her personal story of a pressured abortion and how her fear of abuse and poverty made her an easy target to comply with her boyfriend's command to abort. She also points out what we have seen in data frequently, which is that the more rich you are, you tend to align with the pro-abortion stance. But the less money that you have, the poorer the community that you come from, the more you tend to align with the pro-life viewpoint and not wanting an abortion. She gives her take on why women of poor economic status are so easily pushed into abortion, and what real help for mother and child should look like and what they want in rural communities across the country. From Exposed, Abortion in America, This is Under Pressure. Why are minority communities targeted for abortion? Part 3.
Lorianne Hirschberger, and my location is in Florida.
Lorianne, what kind of work are you doing in the space of helping women who are struggling with unplanned pregnancies?
Well, I am a client service advocate on a mobile pregnancy unit, and because we don't have a pregnancy resource center in our town, because we're very rural, so we depend on the kindness of another center it's from several counties away, and they take their mobile unit to 4, 5, 6 different remote locations. So we're in a very sparse location as far as population goes, and among the most needed, we are among the most, I would say, the demographic that needs these resources. And so our median income salary is also low and compared to some of these metropolis cities that have more resources to offer. So we have women that are in a higher need and less availability of resources. So, and when you have that, you don't have all the facts to make a good decision, in other words. So you lack of knowledge, in other words. So we don't have an abundance of resources, and there's an extraordinary need. And so then it just kind of puts us in that position where I just feel like me personally, my own story, it's like getting handed a Scantron and a multiple choice test, and the only answer is abortion. So that's why I feel like, just based on numbers alone and the need and the lack of knowledge makes us very susceptible and makes our need high.
Can you describe your community, the areas around you? What's it like over there? And do you think it's pretty typical of a lot of the different rural areas in America?
I can say with a certainty that we have a lot of farmland, and we have, it's like one business might prop up our local economy. And that's a good thing that I can use for an example. Like we had a huge paper mill here that recently closed. And so when it closed, it forced a lot of people to either move out of town or take a job with a lesser wage. That was it. If you didn't work at the mill, then you're living with poverty wages. So, and I think that is typical. I hear that a lot as I've, grown up in the United States of America, that in small towns, that's the truth. So when, you make these business decisions to move industry out of a small town, seems like a very sound business decision, but it could collapse an entire community. And that's the type of community that I come from.
And so what kind of needs are you hearing from the women on the ground that you're working with, week to week?
Well, I can just kind of, without giving too much information, I was on the mobile unit today. And so one of the women that I talked to, we do a little intake, and her living situation is she's in her late, early 30s, late 20s, and she's living with her aunt and she's unemployed. And so it's just like, I could go on and I could give you a million stories like this. But so, when you're looking at a pregnancy in that situation, you don't have a stability, you don't have security, you don't know how you're going to raise this baby, but they want their children. Most of the time, 10 out of 10, I haven't come across a woman yet that found out she was pregnant and then she was like, well, I want to get an abortion. I know that that you can run into that, but the majority of the time, the experience that I'm experiencing is that they don't have security, they don't have stability, and they want their children.
Yeah, I think that gels with the national stats that we've also seen, which is, the higher income, the more pro-abortion you are. But the lower income and the poorer populations, the more they are pro-life and wanting to keep their children despite unplanned pregnancies, but are looking for those resources. Is that kind of what you hear often?
Yes, just like, I also am a doula as well. So, and I had a client that I sat down with yesterday. It's only my second appointment with her, but, she is in that same boat where it's uncertain. Her future is uncertain, but what she is certain on is she wants to keep the baby, and she wants support and advocacy. This is just a theory, that I have, but when you're willing to sacrifice, these higher median incomes is like, what is your priority? So when you're willing to sacrifice this life to obtain, the thing that you're ambitious for, I don't know. That's not something that I generally see, on this level of it.
And Lorian, what do you think in your experience dealing, and supporting and advocating for these women? What do you see with your expertise as targets for abortion coercion or forced abortion or that bullying? What are some things in the women's circumstances that could make them a target?
Well, I mean, I could talk a lot of angles on this, but one of the most mind-boggling things that I've heard, and I actually picked this up multiple times while I was advocating in the Florida Senate. One of the questions that those that are pro-abort like to say, this statement is, well, who's going to take care of these babies? And so that's where I feel like a lot of women in my demographic get the pressure is that, this community, this village that it takes to raise a child doesn't want the imposition or the burden of that shared responsibility, because it does take a village, but nobody's asking them to take care of these babies. You've got these pregnancy resource centers that are being raised up. You've got doula programs that are state sponsors being raised up. You've got people out of the benevolence and the kindness of their heart stepping forward. You've got, churches and congregations coming, removing all reason to abort. So nobody's ever asked the Democrat, can you take a baby on? And so that's why I don't understand that. That's some of the pressure that I've seen on a larger scale, but some of my individual pressure, I would say, and I feel like is true for, every woman that's coming from my demographic that has been forced or coerced into abortion. We are more susceptible, I believe. We are weak to that because we don't, and in my situation where it came from a broken home, I want that I need security. I'm looking for security. So, you get into a relationship, or I did with this boy, and I'm living with him, and all of a sudden he says, do this, or I'm taking away that security that I've never had my entire life. So I've got a taste of it now in this relationship. And he's threatening me with, I'm going to take that away if you don't obey this command. That's one of the things. And then, I also had childhood abuse, which is, it seems to be more prevalent in poverty-based communities where you've got, abuse. So I have a very sensitive reaction to violence, in other words. So it doesn't take somebody holding a knife to me or a gun to me for my body to panic and go right into adrenaline dump and fight or flight mode. So, the raising of a voice, the threat, a command, so it heightens the experience when you come from a place where there's been abuse or violence in your past. Your body reacts in a very dramatic way in comparison to somebody that might not have been through trauma or violence. At least that's what I suspect. And then you add on the poverty mentality, which I'm analyzing all these things from my own personal experience. And I believe it's true, for more than just me. But you've got a persistent lack of resources when you look at the poverty issue. And so there's a fear of lack. So, when you're already, and that's hard to break as you get older. I mean, I still will look at my husband with a side eye when he uses a paper towel instead of using a dish rag that I can wash. So but I'm thinking about how that would have affected my decision making when I've got myself to think of, and I've got another baby as well that's depending on me. And I'm thinking about, so there's this amplification when he says, I'm going to take resources away from you when I already feel like resources are slim. It seemed to amplify the effect of the threat. So I see that a lot when people say, when you talk about coercion, I see them get into this place of, well, that's not coercion. And then they want to throw out the legal definition, just disregarding completely the Merriam-Webster definition. But coercion in its basic form, there's a threat. And then you think about myself and the women coming from my position is this is amplified. The body and the mind are going to react in a more heightened state. At least that's the way that it works for me as I reflect on that moment 20 years later, knowing the woman that I am now. Okay, coming from a place of strength, coming from a place of more than enough, coming from a place of a stronger, identity, some more confidence. I would make a different decision now than I did back then. But back then I didn't have the strength that I needed to oppose the threat.
I think that's such a valid point, particularly on the squabbling of the definition of coercion. And, people can go back and forth on that, but I do think a lot of it is lack of education on what is happening, what's really happening on the ground with women in regards to that abortion pressure across this country. I just think a lot of people don't understand the scale. I think they know that pressure happens and it's there and it's nationwide, but I don't think they understand the scale. And I do think that one of the things that we can do, if you have this disagreement about the legal definition versus the dictionary definition, well, why don't we just go ahead and look at what the pro-abortion community says? They say that a woman needs to make a full and empowering choice. So by their own definition, how is any form of a threat, pressure, bullying, how is that this world where this woman is making her own complete and fully informed choice? It's not. And so I actually view this as something where, even though we don't come together on a lot, this is something that we should all be able to agree on, which is women are hurting over this. Of course, their children are hurting, and we need to figure out how to make sure to meet them where they are. They're saying, I want to keep my kids, or they're saying, wait a minute, give me some time. Let me think through this. Let me see what my resources could be. Who can I connect with? What's my network? And I don't think that that's happening at all.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you see this stranglehold, what I call a capitalization on panic. And I can only use myself. Like I'm very, 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 very self-reflective. So recently, I needed to get a new dishwasher. And I'm going to watch YouTube videos. Okay. I'm reading the reviews. I'm deliberating for days because I want to make sure that I got the best product. And it occurred to me, that I spent more time deliberating on that dishwasher. And then this is true, I think, for at large with the entire issue. You do not want to make this type of decision based on panic, a moment of panic. And so I was like, if I could just go back to that moment and have one person look at me and say, you can do this. Don't make a panic move here. You need to spend some time deliberating on this. And here's a way out. So I understand you feel like you're under pressure, but these are the types of things, like, you're exactly right. Let me look at the full menu instead of handing me the test with the only thing that I can choose is abortion. So that's exactly right.
And then you add in the fact that there are the people that you are closest to in your life who are trying to make this decision for you, and it seems like a very hopeless situation.
And it was self-motivated at large. And I'm gonna talk about this, I'm sure, a lot for the rest of my days as I walk in this space. But they come and they say, we just really don't think that you can do this, or that this is just going to be too hard. And really what they're saying is, I don't want to babysit, and you can't do it by yourself. And so it's really a self-motivated interest that they're compelling you to choose abortion. Just like you hear this a lot, my friend encouraged me to abort. Well, your friend doesn't want to lose the version of you that they've gotten used to having access to. So their world is going to change. In my situation, I try to give a lot of grace to my boyfriend at the time. We're not together anymore, and I try to give grace to his parents. And so it really kind of, it kept me from speaking out for a long time. It's been 20 years ago now, but I cannot protect them. I cannot withhold the truth and protect them now, where they made no effort to protect me before. They put their own self-interests ahead of my welfare. And so I have to I'm compelled to tell the truth about abortion at large, especially as it relates to coercion, because I did not understand until, honestly, just recently, because the self-loathing and the blame that goes into that action, where I'm taking the entire weight of this decision on myself, keeps us from, speaking out. And so I'm like, okay, well, I need to put these women out here. I'm going to package up these words, and I'm going to hope that they go out to the right place to let these ladies know that you would not have made that decision if he would have looked in your face and he would have said, let's do this. Let's have this baby. You would not have made that decision if you are the woman that you are today, where you've gained a little bit of life experience and you have some confidence, and you know that when he says, I'm not going to take care of you, that the law will enforce that. He will actually take care of you. And here's the path to make that happen. So, I grieve for those ladies that they don't know that they are a victim. And then when they do step out, I've experienced this recently, when they do step out, that there's this hostile crowd that immediately wants to silence them, that says, you're not a victim, and you can fill in the blank. I'm not going to repeat their words. But, so it's a very hostile crowd on top of self-condemnation, and I can't continue to protect him or his parents.
Let's explore that a little bit, because I think that this is very common. And I think this is why a lot of people have not come forward about their abortion bullying, their coercion that took place in the past. And I suspect it's because they may have a connection still to that previous partner, whether that's through a child or there's some reason why they're still trying to protect that person. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, 100%. Now, I don't generally have any fear in this area because a lot of the people in my story have either passed away or I've made peace with the fact that, they're just not, I'm going to be the villain in their story. Get used to it. So there's a whole nother element of fear. You go through the first traumatic experience and the bullying and the intimidation, and then they kind of keep you in that place out of fear of their reaction.
And Lorian, you can speak to this too, because you have a previous child. You have a child with your former boyfriend as well. I mean, isn't there also a fear of I don't want to say speaking ill, but just telling the truth about what was going on with your child's father?
Oh, absolutely. There is absolutely, because you don't want to, put the odds. You don't want to put this burden of conflict on your child. So and a lot of things I know that I can speak out. I'm in a place where I consider, it's a luxury for me to be at the place where I can speak out, because my son is not young. He's 20 years old. So I can explain these things to him in a way that, he can make a mature decision about how he wants to proceed in these relationships. But it's been difficult. We have an interesting scenario where the dad has had a hands-off approach in the raising of our son. So he's not been in my son's life at all, really. He's honored his financial, obligation, but as far as emotional support, as far as any type of, and emotional investment, he's not been a father to him. So I didn't really have to worry about damaging his perception of his father, because there was none there in our relationship. But it was hard because when I first started telling my story about the abortion experience that I had, or the abortion that I had, it was a light bulb moment for him, because he heard me say these words that I was kind of coerced into abortion, and he's like, well, how did I make it here then? Why did they want me? And it was a devastating moment for me to look into my son's eyes and say, they wanted me to abort you too. And so just the whole world of my son is in a moment, collapsing. His grandparents came to me and tried to encourage me to abort. And his father threatened to not take care of him or me if I didn't abort his sibling. And so you want to talk about the removal of innocence from someone. And so I don't say this, I do not say this lightly when I say you need to think long and hard about when to have this conversation and how you want to come out with this conversation, because it doesn't just affect you. And that's the thing, the whole my body, my choice is it's my son's brother or sister. It was the grandparents' grandchild. It was the father's other child. And so it's such a wide rippling thing and I can only say that we have this conversation often in our house, where Peyton knows where I come from. And he knows why I stand up for life the way that I do, because of the great cost to me, but also the cost to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think this sheds so much light on why we haven't heard more women come forward with their personal stories, because you're right. It affects so many people beyond themselves, and there's a real fear, like you talked about with this stranglehold, where either you're offending someone by exposing the truth more publicly, or it could affect your children. So what would you say to someone that's thinking this through in their head, and they want to share the truth of their life, but they also want to do it in the most tactful way possible?
Oh, that's a beautiful question, and it's one that I think I thank the Lord for preparing me to answer ahead of time, because not only do I, work on the pregnancy mobile unit as a volunteer, or have a doula certification, but I'm also a nationwide post-abortive helpline coach. And so I had a call not long ago, and it was from a young woman, and abortion in her past that her current husband does not know anything about. And she said she's feeling like she needs to have that conversation with him. And so she was looking to me for advice. And I said, have you been through a healing? Have you been through any unpacking of this trauma to process it fully for yourself first before you begin to have conversation with your husband? She had not. And so that's one of the things that we do, is we direct women to resources in their area where they can go and they can unpack this in private before they get ready to reveal it in public. And that's step number one. So that's what I would encourage them to do, is look up, post-abortive recovery or post-abortive healing. Most of them are going to be peer counseling sessions. So that's what I would that are led by women that have been through this experience, because for whatever reason, the mental health community has not picking up the charge on this. They don't recognize post-abortive syndrome as an official diagnosable condition. And of course, the abortion facilities that are inflicting the trauma are not going to say that there's any trauma associated with it, because that would refute the lie that they are, performing harm to women. They're doing damage to women. So you're going to want to look for these post-abortive healing sessions that are led by post-abortive women themselves that have made it through on the other side. And that's going to give you the language, the clear language that you need to articulate this experience to others.
Well, that brings me to your personal story and what really gives you an authority to share with others about this issue, this important issue. So, Lorianne, could you kind of take us back and just go into, what your life was like growing up, and what were some of the factors that you think in your own personal life, set you at an under advantage or a target for this type of pressure, this type of bullying as it happens later on in your life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I come from, like I said, I come from poverty, but a broken home. So my parents were, in my memory, were never together. So they were divorced before I even started forming memories. And it was the whole, sometimes I'm with dad, sometimes I'm with mom. But for the early years, my dad was really kind of homeless, and we just lived with some of his friends from time to time. So I had experienced homelessness before. I knew what that looked like, and to have kids as well. And then you get, later on, my father dies when I'm 13, and I'm now in the full-time care of my mother with a drug issue that is getting out of control, and her boyfriend is abusive, and of course I hate him. So I'm looking for an out, and I was looking for family is what I was looking for. And I think that's a misconception I would love for to die, is that these women are out here just in heat. That's not the way that it is. There's something else motivating them. They want family. They want to be included. They want the safety of a family. A family provides security and safety for a child. So I get in high school, like every other girl that is in school, that, this is the typical American landscape, is you have a high school sweetheart, and that's how it goes. Well, it just kind of, there's in rural county America, there's a lot of drinking in the woods and partying and things like that. So it was not uncommon for us to drink on the back porch every single evening, and they would let me stay in the same room with him, his parents. So it was like, you set me, you should have known better. You set the stage for this to occur. And then as soon as it does occur and I get pregnant, they come to me and with the typical statement of, we'll support you no matter what, but, really need to think about abortion. Trying to console me and make me feel better by, sharing that maybe they had an abortion in their past. Like, it's no big deal, So it's just pushing you into the stall. You're about to jump off of a cliff and you don't have any idea that you're being pushed, this gentle nudge. Okay, so I ended up having the baby, and because I wasn't ready to make the decision on abortion with the first pregnancy, and that's not something that I believed in. And then now we're living in the same house, the boyfriend and I, and 3 months after I gave birth to my son, which was a very rough experience for me, cesarean with hemorrhaging, and so I was weak physically and I was weak emotionally, and I think I was really defeated. I think at that moment I was really defeated because I knew that I was kind of in a situation where I thought I'd found family, but it's really not a family if they're willing to sacrifice your baby to save their own. So I was betrayed, and I was devastated. I was defeated. I was the most vulnerable point I've ever been in my life. And so when the father is like, go get this abortion, here's the money, and if you don't, then I'm not taking care of you or our son. There's no home for me to go back to. And I'd already seen what homelessness looks like with a child, living on your best friend's couch. With it just, I could not. I wish I could go back to that moment and say no. I didn't want to have an abortion. And so you're defeated. I just felt absolutely defeated.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an important point here, which is this is somebody coming to you, and you've kind of set the stage for this because you've talked a lot about just what that poverty mindset is, right? So you have someone now, and you weren't working at the time, right?
No, I was not working at the time.
So you have someone who supposedly is the love of your life, the closest person to you. They're coming to you. You've just given birth to their baby, and they look at you and say, "You're pregnant again. It's this home or homelessness. It's my love or none at all." I mean, it's just an impossible decision.
That's right. And so I remember not feeling like I had any control in that moment. I didn't have any control. And there's such a lack of empathy and such a lack of sympathy for women in that situation where, they're just, I don't wish that on anyone, but I just feel like if they could only see things through that perspective, they would be a little bit more understanding, which is why you see a lot of women that have been through that. These are the ones that are showing up, building the pregnancy centers. These are the ones showing up, answering the phone at 2:00 in the morning when these women are calling and they're saying, "I wish somebody would have told me that it was going to feel like this."
Mm-hmm. And just to reiterate, Lorianne, I know you said this earlier, but you had already fought off and you had expressed very clearly to your boyfriend and his parents that you did not want to abort your first son, your son. So mm-hmm. It's not like they were clueless about where your values lied.
That's right. And the thing about it is that, and I've reflected on this often in the days since, but he would have never suggested abortion if his parents weren't advocates of it. I believe that. I believe that wholeheartedly. So that you see this as like a generational problem where, it was a fix for my issue. Now I'm going to suggest it as a fix for your issue. I just don't believe he would have suggested, and he's even expressed to me his remorse after that. Like since that time, I mean, it's not like he goes around and he's, he doesn't justify his actions. We've only talked about it maybe once since it's occurred, but I do remember a conversation where he was devastated at his part in it. But so he was led astray by his parents as well. And so I don't know I don't know how far it goes back. I don't know how, the parents came to the decision that they were going to abort, but I know that I believe in my heart, based on his reaction to having a part in the abortion, that he would not have come up with that idea on his own unless it was suggested to him.
That is really interesting that this proclivity to abort is almost passed down generationally like some type of cultural keepsake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's no really no remorse about, and the thing about it is like his parents were, just to kind of emphasize the imbalance of power, where his dad was a lieutenant at the jail and his granddad was a county commissioner, and here I am, here I am, coming from a lesser section of society, right? But so that only amplified my lack of faith in the system. Locally, when I'm like, okay, well, I can just go and get help somewhere else. I don't know. I didn't feel like it would be available to me. I feel like I was outnumbered. I feel like he, not only did he have all the resources, but he had more name recognition in the community that was positive, and I was just the poor girl that was looking for a meal ticket. That's what they say about girls like me. I hear that a lot when women from my demographic, they're just looking for somebody to support them. They're looking to get pregnant, and that's not what they're looking for.
Can you speak to that? I think a lot of people that haven't lived in a small town don't understand how much weight is put on last names, like particular last names in towns.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So one of the first questions that you're going to ask is, who's your people? Yeah, and so I'm like, on some level, you're asking me to sacrifice, my right to be loved or to be cherished or honored. I don't think I've ever been made to feel like I was a treasure. I've always been made to feel like, to take pity on, or, and honestly, I say this jokingly, but the only prayers that were prayed over me was, "Oh God, not that one," by some of these Southern Belle, Bible beating church ladies, because they don't want my type of girl to get hooked up with their precious son. I come with baggage that's not my fault. So I'm come from the broken home. I come from the, my in-laws, that you're going to have an in-law that's a drug addict, and, and then not to mention all of the damage that I have had to process. So I wasn't a healthy match, and I get it why they're wanting to be like, I'm not blind to the fact that I come with a lot of needs. However, you're asking, I'm just like, you can't not look at this demographic and say, how can I help, instead of shunning you out the door and condemning you. What can we do to improve the quality of life? And, as a young girl, I had a lot of rage built up. And I used to love to listen to Rage Against the Machine. And so, so, my whole mentality back then, based on this constant sense of rejection, was just like, burn it down. Just total anarchy. I'm sick of living here on this earth. With these judgments on me. But the fact of the matter is, we're all challenged to say, burning it down is not the way. When you get ready to turn that rage against the machine into, how can I make an imprint for humanity, a lasting imprint for humanity on the landscape, then you're moving in the right direction. But the whole burn it down, rage against the machine thing does not work. And turning a blind eye to these ladies, and not just the ladies, but the gentlemen too, the young men coming from the demographic, a rural community, they're under-equipped as well to carry the burden of responsibility and to provide adequately for their families. So, it's time. You got to step in. You got to step into that and see, how can we improve these outcomes? And there's programs out there that are doing it. And that's the thing, like, when you first start walking in this environment, like, the first thing is to say, well, nobody's doing nothing, and what is going to happen with all these babies, and what about this? And stop boiling it down to the most obvious thing and really do some research. And I think that's really what the bottom line is that they don't want to see what's available, because that's work.
Well, can you speak to that a little bit? Because, it seems like when it's not abortion, they will look at underprivileged communities and say, we've got to throw everything that we can to improve these communities. So what are some of the things that they should be looking at versus just this one-size-fits-all non-solution of abortion?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing that's really hard to wrap your mind around is that the demographic that they claim to champion is the same one they're saying they need to kill. So,
right.
That's the thing that doesn't add up. And so I'm like, on some level, I've investigated what could potentially be the motive other than they want to look like the hero. But, the thing that they could be doing is let's have some conversations. They don't, and I find people, this is the point too, that people that work in this space that are pro-life, you can become so blind by your hatred on both sides of it that you don't want to work together to move a solution forward. And the best thing that we can do on the pro-life side, I think, is to not become that, not become inhumane, especially in dealing with our opposition and our opponents. We have to continue to deal with them in a way that's humane and respectful, even though they are not showing those characteristics themselves. I think that is a good start. But as far as community-based programs, I personally feel like, and may the Lord allow me to make this my life's mission, but I think every county needs a pregnancy center. Every county needs a pregnancy resource center. One, because I see so much hope ignited in the eyes of these young mothers when they see that baby come on the screen, and it is indeed wiggling. There is indeed life in the womb.
I would just like to challenge the other side to hold themselves to their own standard, I mean, that is bare minimum. And that's kind of where I think we are with this issue, which is bare minimum. You're saying that you are for women being empowered in making the choice for themselves. But we are hearing from across the country that is not happening. So can you link arms with us and say that we will work together to make sure that these unwanted abortions, this pressure, this bullying, that will be eradicated?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that really, I heard Kristen Hawkins say this recently, and I don't follow her at length, but this was an excellent statement that she made. She said it really ticks her off when you make the assumption that her success comes only at the weight of the sacrifice of a baby. And so that she can't be all the things, that she can't be a mother, she can't be she can't have a career, she can't, have a business and telling, X number of employees what they ought to do, but that she has to make some sort of, the sacrifice is basically essentially telling her that she's too weak to carry all of that responsibly. And so that is not empowerment. That is a defeated attitude. And, words really do matter. The words that you speak into somebody in that moment of weakness could determine the course of their life. And you're right. They do need to, at the very least, they need to stop saying all women. They need to stop carrying the banner of, that they're women's champion and that they're for women's rights. That is a flat out lie. I'm just one voice, but I know of millions of other women that would state the same. Like, you don't speak for me. You need to carry a different banner.
Well, Lorianne, thank you for sharing your personal story. Thank you for sharing your expertise out there, on the ground, working with women day by day, and just look forward to continuing this conversation with you. But I know that this will help a lot of people.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the latest accounts from women across the country that face societal pressure to abort. This concludes our 3-part episodic series within a series, as we heard personal accounts and alternatives to abortion in depth. From Exposed, Abortion in America, this is Under Pressure.